Donald Trump's Epstein problems are getting worse, and they're roiling his own cabinet. His Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who famously said on Fox she had an Epstein client list on her desk, now saying in testimony under oath to Congress that there's no list, which is basically echoing under oath what she put in a DOJ memo disclaiming any list. Second, in this testimony that she gave, which was very combative, and at times there were questions she said she just would not answer, she also disagreed with the recent claims by Donald Trump's own cabinet official, Howard Lutnick, that Epstein was, quote, the greatest blackmailer ever, and that he used blackmail to get special treatment from Republican prosecutors, including Alex Acosta, who later joined the first Trump administration and then was ousted, and that he used blackmail on other people to sort of run what was his criminal sex trafficking empire. This is a huge deal. We've been covering this. I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC, a lawyer, chief legal correspondent, and we've been covering this for a long time, and people have heard a lot about Epstein. But what we're seeing now is kind of a walls closing in on Trump from his own people. It's one thing to have external criticism or investigative reports. It's another to have your attorney general not only contradicting her past claims that she would do Epstein transparency, but having an open public disagreement with one of your cabinet officials who Lutnick says he knew Epstein was over at his house, said he was, of course, not involved in any of the malfeasance or crimes, but Lutnick said that he talked to Epstein, that Epstein bragged about his massage tables and his approach to whatever it was he was doing, which now, according to the evidence, was sex trafficking and criminal abuse of women and girls. But Lutnick said he would blackmail. And so this is a really big problem for Donald Trump, not only because he has this long history with Epstein in some social capacity, but also because there's still a lot of open questions about how Trump's DOJ is handling this, why there's so much secrecy, why they're breaking the vows that Trump, Bondi, and others made to let everyone actually in on whatever happened. The individual, Epstein, of course, is deceased. His co-conspirators in prison. The case is essentially closed. DOJ reiterated that in a memo, which I'll mention in a minute. So there isn't a lot of great reasons why legally you couldn't have more transparency or explain this. There are, of course, some secrecy requirements relating to grand jury material, relating to potential witness or victim identification. But talking about the people who were involved in potentially the crimes or having an accounting of the investigation is something that not only the DOJ could do, but Trump said he would do, a broken vow. It's also important to understand that Pam Bondi is in this problem partly of her own making. She said she had an Epstein client list. Now, under oath, she said she didn't. So if you believe her today and believe that she was telling the truth in this new testimony, then she was lying when she said she had the list on her desk to Fox News. The blackmail claims may sound sort of just generalized. Lutnick is drawing on what he says was firsthand observation of Epstein and what he saw or heard in the neighborhood. The hearing part could be secondhand or hearsay. But remember, I'm going to read here from the DOJ memo that was released under Trump Bondi administration, because this isn't just something that Lutnick or critics are talking about. Reading from the memo, they say, quote, there was no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties, end quote. So that doesn't say we looked into it, we found some things, and we didn't have enough to charge. It says, quote, no credible evidence that he blackmailed prominent individuals. Well, since that memo came out, you now have a Trump official, Lutnick, publicly saying that there was blackmail. So is he credible? Is he completely false and lying? I'm asking the question because you have to square what's happening inside the same government administration. This also came up in the hearing. A Republican Senator, Kennedy, asking the Attorney General, okay, what about what Lutnick said, and do you want to talk to him? And she gave a pretty odd answer. Again, legally, if you're investigating a serious crime, you go and talk to anyone who might have credible information. You, of course, check it with other information, right? That's called corroboration or verification, and that could be with other human intelligence, right? Sources and interviews. It could also be with other material that could increase or decrease the credibility. Do you think someone's telling the truth? That's what investigators do. And Bondi just said, well, if he wants to talk, he can come in and talk to the FBI or DOJ, which is not how investigations work. And so it was a bit of a tell. Why is she departing from the normal way, the standard way, the valid way that investigations work, and saying, oh, maybe it's up to the witness or the person claiming that there was blackmail to come in. That is a tell. And the other thing I want to say in this breakdown is she really didn't have a good explanation for her dealings with President Trump about whether he's in the files. If he's named in the Epstein files, that doesn't mean that it's criminal evidence or that Donald Trump committed a crime, in all fairness. But there has been reporting from the Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, the, of course, sister outlet of Fox News, that he is named in the files, that Bondi went and discussed this in some manner with President Trump, and the implication of that reporting, the question raised, is whether that is another reason why the files weren't released. So Pam Bondi largely dodged those questions. And that's also a problem because while there are internal deliberations that can be kept secret, when you look at the DOJ or the CIA, that can be valid, in all fairness. But if she had a good answer for that doesn't affect a pending investigation, if she could say, actually, let me put it on record, I've never discussed any of this with the president. Or every time I've discussed it with the president, he has been pushing for transparency, we want to figure out how to do that, well, that'd be a very different answer. Instead, she seems to be dodging or ducking on whether the embarrassment or worse is a factor, according to the Wall Street Journal, in having secrecy for this important case, whether that's something that she briefed or discussed with Donald Trump, as she also does what sounds like a cover story or official story, quote unquote, that matches the DOJ memo that the Trump folks put out, but doesn't even have support or consistency with a current Trump official. And that's the final point here. This is a big case with a lot of different pieces to it, but the DOJ memo, which was put out by Bondi, I'm just looking at it, 2 pages, no credible evidence, FBI seal on there. It was put out to try to put this to rest. Obviously, it didn't do that. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're looking at this as a lawyer like I am or a journalist like I am, as an investigator, you would say, if the memo's true, then the files would support it. So why not release, with some redactions, most of those files? It would support the thing you're putting out that says this is over, nothing to see here. And so now we're at a point where the questions are coming from inside the House. The allegations about Epstein blackmail are undercutting DOJ's memo while they hide other evidence, and that's coming from inside the cabinet. And so this is a big problem for Donald Trump, obviously for all the reasons we know, but it's also a serious legal question for the DOJ, which has not exactly bathed itself in glory in handling this case that affects so many people with leadership that claimed they cared about it. And so we're going to keep reporting on this. I think the big obvious questions here are, why do Trump officials, or at least one, say there was blackmail to undercut the DOJ? Why does Pam Bondi at the DOJ depart from all normal investigative process to claim under oath that if there's information that should come out, they'll just wait for someone to walk in rather than going and doing that interview? They have all the legal powers. They can make Mr. Lutnick testify or subpoena him to provide evidence of whatever he has. And if in that process it turns out that he was exaggerating, then that's a good lead for them to run down. And why is Bondi apparently so reticent to discuss some of these key questions around whether she briefed Donald Trump about being named in the files, as the Wall Street Journal reports, and whether that's part of why the public is still waiting on getting this information without any sign that people are going to be giving up on the story and the issues. That's the breakdown here. Ari Melber, you can follow my YouTube at Ari Melber. I will read some of the comments and questions. I've been connecting with people out here in that way, so thanks for your interest.